through the Module 1, which is the intro module, we'll actually go into Module 2 and actually get started setting up your company file. Go ahead and make sure you have pen and paper so you can take some notes. And like I said, watch these in order. And if you have questions as you go along, feel free to shoot us an email and let us know, and we'll get right back to you. Let's go ahead and jump right into Section 2, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the desktop version versus the online version. Intuit offers both a desktop version of QuickBooks and an online version. I want to take a few moments and tell you a little bit about each one. That way you can make an informed decision when you get ready to decide which one you'd like to use. Let's start with the desktop version. Every year in September, they come out with the next version. Usually it's the first or second week in September. Currently they're on the 2020 version. They only support 3 versions back. Right now they're supporting 20, 19, and 18. That means if you have a previous version, it will still work, but you won't get any of the updates. Maybe they have a patch that they want to send out. Maybe you're signed up with the Intuit payroll service. You wouldn't get updates. So you want to think about at least upgrading to the current version every 3rd year. They do make a Mac version as well. There's also a US version and a Canadian version of QuickBooks. We're going to be using the desktop US version for these videos. Now let's take a minute and talk about the online version. This is subscription based. That means that you will have to sign up for a monthly subscription and pay that fee every month, and they've got several different ones you can choose from. The advantage to having the online subscription is that you can access your QuickBooks file from anywhere in the whole wide world. If you happen to have a virtual assistant, then they could have a login. You could access it when you go on vacation. It's really a nice little feature in that respect. If you don't need that, I always suggest you go back to the desktop version because it's a lot more user-friendly. It's got a lot more options than the online version has. But I do want to take you to the Intuit website where you can compare some of the subscription pricing and see what's available. Give me just a second and I'll pull it up. This is a comparison of all of the online subscription services that they have to offer. If you want to see this screen, just do a quick Google search. You can type in the search box QuickBooks Online Comparisons, and this will be one of the links that you can choose. I want to go ahead and talk to you a little bit about each one of these. That way you'll know what each one has to offer. And notice that you can try any of these for free for the first 30 days. You may want to start there. But these are the monthly prices they have right now, and you'll notice they're all 50% off for the first 3 months, so that price is going to increase. Let's start with the Simple Start. This is designed for the person who's just starting their business. You really don't have a lot of expenses yet, or you don't have a lot of customers yet, that sort of thing. You can see that it allows you to have one user that can log in. It will track your income and expenses, your mileage. You can go ahead and invoice customers once you start getting some new customers. You can actually run some really basic reports. You can actually do sales tax, 1099 contractors, but some things you can't do that I feel are really important. And one of them is managing your bills. The bills are the things that you have to pay monthly that may come in the mail, or they may be automatic payments, but they're still bills that you owe, and you need a way to track those. I suggest you at least move up to the next one called Essentials, where you can manage your bills and track your time. Now you'll notice that this one does not do inventory. If inventory is something you need, then you'll need to move up to the Plus subscription, which is the most popular one. And you can see here that it includes your inventory, and you can track what they call job or project profitability. You'll notice that the last one, the advanced one, this is actually designed to do everything in QuickBooks. And the one thing I want to point out for all of these is you'll notice this one allows you to have up to 25 users. That means there are 25 people that can have their own username and password and actually log in, whereas this one allows you up to 5, this one up to 3, and this one up to 1. Most people don't need more than 3 to 5. I do actually suggest most people start with this one and then upgrade later if you need to. The other thing I want to mention is you do have this full service live bookkeeping over here, and you can see it says it starts at $235 a month. This is really a great feature for someone who wants to be out in the field or needs to be on the road, and they need someone else to do their books for them. This is just like hiring a bookkeeper. The neat thing about this is that both you and this bookkeeper can actually talk live, and you can also both be in your company file at the same time while you're discussing what's going on with your books. Those are going to be your options right there for signing up for one of the different subscriptions for the QuickBooks Online. One other thing I wanted to mention is if you currently have the desktop version and you wanted to actually take your data and move it up to the online version, you can do that fairly easily. However, if you decide you'd like to go the other way, maybe you start with the online version and you really don't like it and you want to go back to the desktop version, Intuit will have to get involved and they'll have to actually go ahead and back up your file for you, and then they'll help you actually restore it back to your desktop version. That's pretty much all I wanted to tell you about the two different versions of QuickBooks, the desktop and online. I do want to move into section 3 and talk to you about the different versions of the desktop version of QuickBooks, because there's several different choices you'll have when you go to make your purchase. Let's go ahead and flip over to section 3. There are several different versions of QuickBooks Desktop, and I want to go through a broad level of all three of these just to give you a little bit of information so that when you're out to make your purchase, then you'll know which one works best for your company. Let me just head over to Intuit's website. I want to show you a QuickBooks Desktop comparison, and we'll go through some of the options. If you've decided you want to go with the desktop version of QuickBooks, you need to know that there are 3 basic tiers of levels for the desktop version. If you go to quickbooks.intuit.com/desktop, then you can see the same screen right here, and it will help you make your decision a little bit easier. But let me give you a little bit of information about each one. The Pro version is typically where most small business owners start, and it is the version we're going to be using throughout this set of videos. You can have up to 3 users in a company file in the Pro version. When you go to the Premier version, you can have up to 5 users, and the Premier Edition actually has some industry-specific tools as well. And what that means is that they actually sell different versions of the Premier. For example, there's a Contractor's Edition, there is a Real Estate Edition. And that means that they will set up a lot of the list based on that type of business. Now you can set up your own list with the Pro and use it for those particular industries, but Premier has a lot of it already set up. When you get to the Enterprise Edition, you're going to be able to set up to 30 users, and this is the one that has the most power right here. If you're just starting out though, you're not going to want to start with Enterprise. It's way too expensive. You would start with the Pro and upgrade if you need to. But I want to show you that there are a lot of features that they all have. For example, they all have the ability to track income and expenses. You can do invoicing, run reports, send estimates, track your sales tax, manage bills, and track your time. Let's see what else is down here. You can also track your inventory, you have list limits, and you can pay your 1099 contractors. And that's really all the stuff that the average small business owner would need anyway. But let's look at some of the other options that you only find in the Premier and Enterprise. And that's the forecasting, which allows you to basically look at how your business is doing now and forecast how it might do in the coming months or years. You also have industry-specific features. If you happen to purchase the Real Estate Edition, then you would already have some of the features specific to real estate built into it. You only have these last features available in the Enterprise Edition. That's your mobile inventory barcode scanning. You have access to the QuickBooks Priority Circle, which is a group of other users, and support available for Enterprise users. You have the advanced pick, pack, and ship option, and you can have up to 30 users, as we talked about. Go ahead and check out this site. Again, it's quickbooks.intuit.com/desktop. And check this out before you go out and make your purchase, just to make sure you're getting the one that will work best for you. Let's go ahead now and go over into section 4, and we're going to talk about some of the new features in the PC version of the QuickBooks 2020.
QuickBooks 2020 had several new features for the PC version and the Mac version this year. I wanted to go ahead and talk to you about the changes for the PC version, and over in section 5 we can talk about the Mac version changes as well. Let me go ahead and show you the 6 new changes. I'm going to give you a quick overview and then I will actually take you into QuickBooks and we'll look at each one of these. Of the 6 changes, none of these are really earth-shattering, but let's go ahead and go through these quickly. The company file search is new. If you happen to open QuickBooks and you'd like to see a particular company file that's not on the list, you can actually search from within QuickBooks now and go find that company file. I'll show you how that works. The second thing is we now have automated customer payment reminders. You can actually send reminders to customers who owe you money, and it's really not automated because you still do have to go in and actually tell QuickBooks which customers you'd like to send it to, but it is a little bit nicer that you have that feature now. The next thing is that in your emails, you can actually now add a customer PO to the subject line. I'll go through and show you how to do that because that's very helpful when you have customers that work with purchase orders. You now can also collapse your columns in your job and class reports. Job and class reports are typically really long from left to right, so it's a really nice feature that you can go in and collapse those columns. You also can look at the payroll status for direct deposit. You're going to be able to see, for example, if the payroll's been processed yet, if the money's been sent to the bank, or if your money's been sent to the employee. And the last thing I want to mention is the ability to combine multiple emails for single customers and jobs, employees, or vendors all at one time so you don't have to send multiple emails. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks and I will show you how these things work. You've opened QuickBooks and you'd like to open a company file that's not on this list here. You could go ahead and use the Open option and search your computer, but you now have an option called Find a Company File that will look through QuickBooks and then search your computer for it. All you have to do is type the name of the company file you'd like here, and then go ahead and hit the Find option, and you'll see that it has found that file for you. Notice that it tells you all the information like the date it was modified, the location. All you have to do is click on it and then you can choose Open. And by the way, if you wanted to look on a flash drive, for example, or some removable type of media or on a network, you can choose those options over here. I'm going to go ahead and hit Open, and it's going to open my new company file, and that's really all there is to that. The next new feature in QuickBooks is the ability to have automated payment reminders sent out to your customers. These are not really automated because you still have to go in and tell QuickBooks to actually send them. But I want to show you where the feature is and give you an idea of how it works. We're going to go in depth into this particular option over in Module 4, Section 6. The option happens to be under Customers on the menu. Then you'll want to come down to Payment Reminders. There are 3 things you have to set up, starting with the mailing list. This is just a list of all of the customers that you have predetermined are going to get an overdue invoice notice when they're 30 days overdue or 1 day overdue in this case. You would have to create those lists, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do when we get to Module 4. The next part of this, going back to customers and back to payment reminders, is to schedule those payment reminders. And this is for you. You can actually set it up so that if anyone is over 1 day due, and that's based on that list I just showed you, then it will remind you and show you a list of all of those customers. The same thing with the 30-day ones. The last part of it is actually going in and telling QuickBooks that you're ready to send those reminders via email. That's going to be the Review and Send Payment Reminders option. This is a list of the 3 customers that met my criteria. In this case, it looks like they are 1 day past due, but you can see over here that it has the person I'm clicked on, it has their email address, their invoice that's overdue, and then it has a little body for the particular email, and all you have to do is go in and edit it as a one-time thing if you would like to. You'll notice if I click on the second one over here that the invoice changes and also the email address changes because it reflects the particular customer you're sending it to. Then you would just say send it now, and that's how those work. Like I said, we'll go in depth in that over in Module 4, Section 6. QuickBooks will now pull the purchase order number if you have one set up on your invoice. It'll actually pull it into the subject line if you're going to email this to your customer. If I come up here and click email and I email invoice, you'll notice that right here it shows me the PO number. Now it won't automatically do it unless you've set this up in the preferences first. I'm going to cancel and just show you quickly where to go to do that. You're going to click on the edit option from the menu, come down to preferences. You'll choose send forms on the left and make sure you're on the company preferences tab. Now in here typically you will see the basic invoice already set up. It will not let you edit that one. That means you'll have to create your own, and you'll do that by adding a template. You'll notice that when I click add template, it pulled in all of the information from the basic one, so I don't have to type it over, but I could if I want to edit any of this information. But I want you to notice the subject line currently does not have the PO number. I'm just going to put a little space in there and then come down here where it says insert field, and I'm going to choose the customer PO number, and that's all you have to do. Just hit save. And now I'm going to go ahead and click OK. When I go look at the email now, you'll notice that it actually has a field for the PO number there. And like I said, it will pull it if you've got it right over here. And then all you do is send it out. Collapsing your columns and rows in your reports is now really easy to do. I'm looking at a profit and loss by job, and in a report like this, it's very long from left to right. If you notice, here's Mike Ballack, and Mike has 2 jobs, and then there's a total for Mike Ballack. All I have to do is come up to this new option that says collapse columns at the top, and now I've collapsed all of my columns, and you'll see I only see the total for Mike Ballack and all of his jobs. If I want to expand these, I go back and expand the columns. There are a couple of new things as far as payroll is concerned. The first one is if you have QuickBooks 2020 and a brand new subscription for payroll, then the employees will be able to go in themselves and actually fill out their payroll information, like their name and their address and their withholdings and so forth. If you have an existing subscription, they're going to be rolling this out over time, so you may not have it as soon as you get QuickBooks 2020. Make sure when you open QuickBooks and it asks you to update it that you do that in order to get some of these changes. Let me go ahead and go real quick up to the employees, and you'll see the payroll setup. This is where you'll be able to go and send your employee an email asking them to go ahead and set up their profile. The other thing you'll be able to do is if you have automatic deposit set up, there's going to be a place where you can go in and check to see that that money has actually gone through. A lot of times when you pay employees through direct deposit, you don't know if there was a problem or if they actually got their money. So this is a great feature they've added to the QuickBooks 2020. This last little feature is kind of nice. Basically what it allows you to do is if you're going to email any form like an invoice, an estimate, then you have the ability to combine all the ones that go to the same customer or vendor into one email, where before you had to send them separately. The way you do this is go up to File on your menu, and if I go down to Send Forms, it's going to give me a list of all of the, in this case, invoices that I've checked the little box on the invoice that I'd like to email them later. There are several different customers in this list. Notice at the bottom this little option to combine forms to recipient in one email, and you'll see now that it's actually separated these, and it will send one email to each of these customers. The only thing you need to know about this is that if you've got it set up where you can receive an automatic payment from your customer, then that feature does not work if you send this out. Notice also at the bottom that it's going to take a minute to send these emails once you hit send now, so just know that you won't be able to use QuickBooks for just a couple of minutes till they're all sent. And that's all there is to the send forms option right here. Those are some of the changes, like I said, that are in the new QuickBooks 2020. These are across all the versions, so no matter if you have QuickBooks Pro, if you have Premier, if you happen to have the Accountant version or the Enterprise version, these are all the ones that are standard across the board. The one thing I want to say as well is for the Canadian version, some of these options may not be in there, so just kind of know that. Now that you've had a chance to see the new features that are in the PC version, Let's go ahead and head over to Module 5 and talk a little bit about some of the new features that the Mac version has this year.
Intuit did come out with a Mac version this year, and they did have some enhancements to the software. I wanted to go ahead and go over a few of those with you just to give you an idea of some of the new features that are in the Mac version 2020. The first enhancement I'd like to talk about is the dark mode user interface. If you're a Mac user and you've been using the Mojave operating system 10.14 or anything newer, then you've probably discovered there is a theme called the dark theme that most people are absolutely in love with. What it basically does is shifts nearly all of your on-screen visual elements to dark grays and blacks, and many Mac users actually upgraded their operating system just to get this dark theme. Well, you're going to like the fact now that Intuit has totally redesigned their support for this dark mode. It allows customization of your viewing mode within your QuickBooks Pro for Mac. Go ahead and try it out. If you're not familiar with how to get to the dark mode and turn it on, this is all you have to do. Go to your Apple mode, go to System Preferences, go to General. You'll see Appearances, and that's where you're going to find the dark mode. It's going to allow you a lot of customization of your viewing mode within QuickBooks Pro for your Mac. Intuit has really spent some time modernizing the reporting features in QuickBooks. You're going to find that they're a lot more customizable now. They're a lot more easy to navigate. And one of the things they've done is they've actually added a sidebar to your reports for searching. You're going to see it show up on the same screen as your report on the right-hand side, and you're going to be able to easily go in there and look for something. If you want to make a change to something, it's going to have real-time reporting, and those updates show up automatically. You're really going to like the new modernization they've done with all the reporting. The Company Snapshot feature's really been enhanced as well. What the Company Snapshot allows you to do is see in one central location your most critical business data. And they've enhanced this by offering some new customizable data ranges. They have new layouts, new widgets. You're going to be able to configure the information you want and have it show up exactly the way you want it to. And that way you don't have to run lots of different reports to get some of the information you could see on this one screen in the Company Snapshot. You've also got a feature in QuickBooks for Mac where you can search through your attachments for different things you might be looking for, and they've really improved that search feature a lot. You'll want to make sure you try that out because you're going to be able to find things much easier than you used to be able to. One of the things that most QuickBooks users don't really know how to handle is a bounce check. And they've actually enhanced the bounce check processing feature now in QuickBooks for Mac. What happens now is you're going to have peace of mind because you're going to know how to handle those bounce checks correctly and with ease. It also avoids you having to contact your accountant to take care of that for you. They're just going to walk you through that whole bounce check processing, and then you'll see how to enter it in QuickBooks the correct way. Another new feature is the ability to use the iPhone scanner. It allows you to upload text and searchable images to QuickBooks with your iPhone camera. And what this is going to do is save you a lot of time and money because you can quickly scan through some of your key documents and you can search for some text that might be in some photographed bills. You might have some receipts or invoices you had taken pictures of, purchase orders, tax forms, and you'll be able to actually search through those images a lot more quickly now that you can actually upload those with your iPhone camera. Another new feature that you see both in the PC and the Mac version is the company file search. When you're actually opening a company file, if you don't see it on that initial screen, then you have to go to the Open option and search your computer for that file. And sometimes it's hard if you have filed your QuickBooks files all over the place in your computer. With that company file search, it will search your computer for all of your QuickBooks files, give them to you in a list, and that way you can search that list for the one you might be looking for. That's a really, really handy feature when you're looking for different QuickBooks files. The last one I want to mention is the automated payment reminders that is both in the PC and the Mac version this year. What it allows you to do is easily set reminders for customers that they have invoices that are due. And what that does for you is it allows you to get paid faster. It also reduces time you have to spend following up with customers. They also have very flexible customized reminders that you can send for specific customers, and this is really going to help you out a lot and increase the cash flow in your business. Those are some of the new features that Intuit has come out with the Mac version this year. That's going to go ahead and wrap up Module 1. Let's go ahead and go over into Module 2, and we're going to talk about getting started setting up your company file. The first thing you'll need to do when you're working with QuickBooks is go ahead and set up what's called your company file. Each file that you set up in QuickBooks is called a company. You can have as many companies as you would like. For example, a lot of times I see small business owners that will actually have a company file set up for their actual company, and they'll have a separate one set up for their personal information. It might be that you're a bookkeeper and you'd like to have a separate file for each of your customers. Any way you'd like to set it up, you can have as many company files in QuickBooks as you would like. They do not talk to each other, so don't worry about mixing information. And you can only have one company file open at any given time. The first thing you have to do is set up that company file, and that's what I want to do with you here in this first section. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks, and I will show you how to go ahead and get that company file set up. When you first open QuickBooks, you're going to see this screen that says No Company Open. If you actually had previously opened some company files, you would see them listed here. If you didn't see one that you know is in your computer and you'd like to open it, you can open it a couple of ways. You can go to Open here, or you can use this Open or Restore option right here, which will allow you to search your computer for that particular file. The Restore option just basically means that if you had a backup copy you needed to restore to QuickBooks for some reason, you could get to it through this option here. You also can find a company file over here, and this is a new feature in the 2020 version. You would actually just type in the name of your company file you were searching for here, and then choose Open, and it would search for you, and it would find it in this list, and you can double click on it. Notice it will search your local drives, meaning your hard drive on your computer, for example. It would actually search any removable media, which would be if you had a flash drive, for example, or if you're on a network and you want to search there, you can do that. I'm just going to hit cancel right now, and that's going to take me back to the No Company Open window. You also have these sample files right here that we'll talk about a little bit later. These are basically a product-based business and a service-based business. If you don't know how to set something up, or you're not really sure if what you did is correct, open one of these sample files and see how they did it. Because this is the very first time, we're going to have to go through a process of creating our new company file, and that's this option right here. Once I click on this, it's going to take me into the Easy Step interview. And the first thing it asks you is, do you want to set up your business? And you can use the Start Setup option here, or you can go down here to Other Options and choose to actually do the Advanced Setup. I'm going to stop right here because I want to go into section 2 where we actually start going through this Easy Step interview as it's called. Matter of fact, I'll click on the Advanced Setup and that'll launch me into the Easy Step interview. We saw in section 1 of this module, which is module 2, Getting Started, how to actually get started setting up your company file. Now we have to go through what's called the Easy Step interview and go ahead and fill out all the information QuickBooks would need to get your company file mostly set up. We're going to be going through this interview and it's going to take a few moments, but you want to make sure that you have a couple things handy. You want to make sure that you have information about your company, like the company name, address. You might need to use the company federal ID if you happen to have one. So just have those things handy so that we can answer these questions as we go through this interview. There is a part 2 to this particular section, so make sure you watch both parts so that you have the whole interview section down pat. The Easy Step interview will take you a few minutes to get through, so don't be in a rush, but you'll be glad you did it when you're done because you'll have all the information filled in. You'll notice on this first screen here that it's asking you to put in information about your company. This is basic information like the company name, the company address, things like that. The tax ID number is not really necessary. The only reason you would actually need it would be if you happen to use the Intuit payroll service. They're going to ask you to have that in here so that you can use it for payroll, but other than that, you're not really going to need this. Let's say this company we're working with is ABC Plumbing. I'm going to go ahead and put in their address, which is Coatesville. I'm sure I spelled that right. And this is going to be in Pennsylvania. We'll go down and pick PA. And then the zip here will be 19320. You can also put in a phone number and a fax, an email, and a web address. You will want to fill those in because when you go to send correspondence to either customers or vendors, for example, QuickBooks will pull this information. I'm going to click Next at the bottom, and the next screen asks me to select my industry. Now you'll notice there are many different industries in here. There's automotive, there's construction. If you go down the list, you'll see there's a nonprofit. Pick one that's close to what you do. It does not have to be exact, and there's really no wrong answer here. At the very bottom of the list, if you're still not sure what to do, there's a general product or service-based business, and you can choose one of those. I'll just choose the general product-based business and click Next. This screen asks, how's your company organized? Now don't get hung up on this screen. As a matter of fact, if you have an accountant that does your taxes, and I always suggest that with a business, you never do your own taxes, I want you to pick Other or None. The only reason this option is here is because a lot of times a business may decide to use a software program like TurboTax, for example, to do their taxes. And if that's the case, then TurboTax has to look at QuickBooks and pull information onto certain lines on the tax form. That's why I'd ask you, how's your company organized? Now here's the thing. If you choose one of these options, every screen that you go to will have an extra question which will ask you, which line on the tax form do you want to pull this onto? And you're not going to know because you're not an accountant. If you just don't have that option in here, you won't have to worry about it. So I suggest everyone choose Other or None and click Next. Now it asks me to select the first month of my fiscal year. I'm going to leave it on January, but of course if yours is different, you could change that. I'm going to hit Next one more time, and it's going to talk to me about setting up the administrator password. I do want to spend a little bit of time on this because it's very important that you set up usernames and passwords for each person that's using your QuickBooks company file. QuickBooks doesn't make you do this, it's just highly suggested. What this means is that when you open your company file each time, the user will have to put in their username and their password. Right now it's asking you about setting up the administrator password, which would be yourself since you're setting up the company file. I'm going to go ahead and put a password in here. And remember that a good password will be any combination of letters, numbers, special characters. It is case sensitive, so you'll want to remember this password. We'll talk in a later module more about setting up passwords. I'm going to click Next at the bottom, and now it says Create your company file. This is like the Save screen. You'll want to go ahead and actually choose a place to save your company file. And once you do, you'll notice it'll start creating your company file in the background here. You'll start seeing your icons appear over here, and it'll have your company name at the top like you see ABC Plumbing now and that sort of thing. Give it just a couple seconds and it will be done. Once your company file has been created, that means that if you get out of this at any time by hitting this Leave, you can come back in and set up your options again. You can't get back into the Easy Step interview, but I'm going to show you as we go along how you would go in and change all of these options. But let's go ahead and continue customizing this for your business. I'm going to click Next, and the first thing it asks is, what do you sell? Your choices are services, products, or both. Again, there's no wrong answer here. If currently you sell services, but maybe you add products later on, you can always go and turn those options on. If you're not sure, you can just hit both right here, and that way you'll have all of the options on your home screen. And really all you're doing when you answer these questions is turning on the options on your home screen. As we go through here, if you have different screens than I do, it's because of how you answered the previous questions. So there's nothing wrong with it. Just kind of hold tight till I get to where you are or vice versa. I'm going to hit Next at the bottom. And because I said I sell products, it asked me, would I like to charge sales tax? We'll talk about sales tax in a later module as well, but I'll just say yes and turn it on for now. And now it's asking, would I like to create estimates in QuickBooks? Think of estimates as quotes for a job. Construction is a great example because they estimate jobs. If you're using this feature, you go ahead and say yes. And the next thing asks if I'd like to use statements in QuickBooks. Businesses who use statements will actually send a statement at the end of every month, and it's basically a summary of everything that happened during the month. It will have at the top how much the customer owed you from the prior month, then it will list any payments or any invoices, and then what the customer owes you now. I'm going to go ahead and leave this on yes and click on next. This next screen asks about using progress invoicing. Now, if I were setting up QuickBooks, I would have put this question right behind the estimate question, because here's what this means. If you estimate jobs for customers, then you have the ability to pull information from those estimates into an actual invoice so that you can get paid. You can actually invoice your customer progressively. You might invoice them for certain items that were on the estimate. You might invoice them for a percentage of the estimate. And when you're finished, then QuickBooks will know, and it will not ask you again if you want to invoice any more from that estimate because it's all been pulled in. If you are estimating jobs, you will want to use progress invoicing. I'm going to click next, and now it asks about managing the bills that I owe. Bills come in the mail that have to be paid. A lot of people will have a little basket on their desk, and when the bills are ready to be paid, they'll just go through and pick out the ones that they want to write a check for. You should put all of your bills in QuickBooks, and that way you can run reports at any time to see who you owe, how much money you owe, if it's over 30 days, things like that. Think about, too, if you're going to the bank to get a loan for your business, they're going to want to see if you have any accounts payable is the term, or any bills that you owe. So make sure you put any bills or any expenses for the company that are coming up in QuickBooks so that you have accurate reporting. I'm going to click next, and now it asks me about tracking inventory in QuickBooks. I want to go ahead and stop the video right here because there is a second part, and we'll just pick up where we left off right here. I'll see you shortly over in part 2. We are working on going through the Easy Step interview to go ahead and set up our company file. Let's go ahead and keep on going. This is part 2 of section 2 using the Easy Step interview. Okay, when we left off, we were on this screen where QuickBooks is asking if we want to track inventory. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about what the word inventory means. If you sell physical products in your store, for example, and you track the fact that you have 6 in the back room and you'd like QuickBooks to let you know that you have 2 left so you can order some more, that's an example of true inventory. Sometimes businesses sell products, but they don't track how many they have in the back. They might just order a few as the customers request them. That's what we consider non-inventory, when you don't want to track how many you have. All you have to do here, if you want to track inventory, is just say yes, and then click Next. This screen asks about tracking time in QuickBooks, and there are a couple ways you can use the time feature. One of the ways is if you do job costing in your business, and a common question is, what is job costing and how do I actually do this? Well, job costing basically means that if you work on different jobs or projects, you want to know all of the costs involved in working on that particular project or job. And part of that is the time that you or your employees or subcontractors might spend working on that job or project. You can track that time in QuickBooks. The second way you can use it is, let's say you're in a business where you bill your customers by the time you spend. Maybe like an attorney, for example. He might track all the time during the month when he talks to you on the phone, and at the end of the month, he might send you an invoice or a bill for that. So there's a couple different ways you can use that time tracking. I suggest that you do turn that on. The next question says, do you have employees? Now, I find this question very misleading right here. Employees are people that you actually give a paycheck to and you deduct taxes from them. If you have subcontractors that work for you, they are not employees. They have nothing to do with payroll, absolutely nothing. They're considered vendors in QuickBooks. The way they should be handled is they should always send you a bill and you pay that bill. Do not try to use subcontractors as employees to save on taxes, because at some point you will get in trouble for doing that. You need to either have employees or have 1099 contractors that work for you. They're considered 1099 contractors if they dictate their own schedule. If you dictate their schedule, where they have to be, what time, then they need to be set up on payroll. I would go ahead and say yes here, and you can check whichever ones you want. Right now, we're just turning on an icon so that we can do payroll, or if we have 1099 contractors in the future, we can pay them. I'm going to click Next, and it asks about using accounts in QuickBooks. I'll click Next once more, and now it asks about selecting a date to start tracking the finances. You get to decide which date you'd like to start with in QuickBooks. It just has to have a date to start with. You can actually start with the beginning of your fiscal year, or you can use today's date or set a particular date that you'd like to start with. If you're just getting into QuickBooks towards the end of the year and you're really wanting to start fresh next year, then you don't really need to go back to the beginning of the current fiscal year. However, if you said to me that you would like to put all of 2019 in here, for example, then I would go back to the beginning of the fiscal year and enter everything that happened. That is really your choice what date you want to start with. I would actually try to make that date correspond with that bank statement. So if you decided, for example, that today you bought QuickBooks, and let's just say that it is November of 2019, I would try to go back to maybe the first or whatever date your bank statement cut off and make them correlate that way. You can still enter something prior to that date or after that date. It just needs a date to start with. Now what we see here is our income and expense accounts. What you'll see is a list of what is called the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts basically is a listing of all the buckets that you'd like your money to go into. So for example, when you look at this list, if you're going down the list and you say to yourself, you know, I have a lot of charitable contributions, you can click on that to turn that one on. Or maybe you don't have a lot of computer and internet expense, you can turn that one off. I usually suggest you just leave what it pulls up automatically, and then we're actually going to get into the chart of accounts over in Module 3 and Section 3 and spend more time on it there. I'm going to click Next, and it's going to say, congratulations, you've completed the Easy Step interview. Now at this point, I would say that 80 to 85% of your company information is set up. We still have a little bit more, but let's go ahead and hit Go to Setup here. And then what you're going to see is a few little screens pop up that will give you some suggestions, or like in this case, this is what they call a desktop usage and analytics study. I'm just going to hit Continue past that. If you see this screen, it's asking you, first of all, would you like to add the people you do business with? Do you want to add your customers now, your vendors now? Do you want to add your products and services that you sell? And also, do you want to add your bank accounts? Let's just go ahead and say Start Working. We're going to set those up as we go along. You could have also clicked the X in the top right of that particular window. And you'll also get a new feature tour that will appear if you're new to QuickBooks. Now these are nice to go through if you want to go through and see some of the new features, but if you don't want to, just click the X in the top right hand corner and that will close that window for you. You'll also notice that you will get these yellow helpful hints that appear around your screen. You can turn those off if you want. You'll notice they will just fade automatically if you don't do anything with them. And this is what we call your home screen right here. Now we're going to spend time in a little bit going through this home screen. Let's go ahead now and go over to Section 3, and I'm going to take you into a feature called My Company and give you a quick overview of how it works. There's a feature in QuickBooks called My Company. Basically what it is when we went through the Easy Step interview and set up our company file, if you remember, the very first screen asked us to put in information about the company, like the address, if we had a federal tax ID number, website, email, things like that. Well, what if we misspelled it, or we forgot to put some of that information in? This is where we're going to go to actually edit that information. This little section is called My Company. Let me flip over to QuickBooks and I'll show you real quick how to get into the My Company feature. All you have to do to get to the My Company feature is go up to the menu at the very top of your screen and click on Company. and then you'll see My Company. In here, this is all the information that you used when you went through the Easy Step interview to set up your company file. Let's say that I misspelled Coatesville, for example, right here. All I have to do to edit that information is come over to this little pencil, and then I can edit anything I see on the screen there. So I'm going to take out that E. And if I wanted to add a phone number, I could certainly do that. I can go ahead and add it right here. And of course, I can add fax, email, and website here as well. You'll notice on the left-hand side that I'm currently on the contact info. If I click on legal information, it brought in the same information that I had used to set up the company with. And if the legal information happens to be different, maybe the company is owned by some sort of organization, I could fill out all of that information right here. And obviously, I would want to edit Coatesville again, make sure I spell it correctly. The next tab down on the left is your company ID information. If you remember, it asked us to put in our federal ID number, and we decided not to do that. But if I wanted, I could here. And if I wanted to put in the Social Security number, I could here. Maybe I'm not incorporated, and that's what I'm using. You'll find there are a lot of places in QuickBooks where it asks for some what I call personal information. And if you don't have to have it, I wouldn't put it in here. Next on the left is report information. This is the information on the first month of your fiscal year, your tax year, if you have a particular income tax form you use. And remember here, I told you to leave it on Other or None unless you happen to be using another software package that works with QuickBooks for tax purposes. And the last option on the left is your payroll tax form identification. If you have a particular person that is preparing and signing your payroll tax forms, you might want to put their contact information in here, their title, and their phone number. And that's really all you have to do to change that information about your company. I'm going to click OK and see what else is here on the screen. Now, a couple of other things you'll notice is your version of QuickBooks. You'll notice it's right over here, and it's going to have your license number and all that information. You're also going to see a lot of services that QuickBooks can offer as ancillary services to QuickBooks. For example, when you decide to do payroll, if you decide to use the Intuit payroll service, it is not free. You do have to pay for it. Here's where you can turn it on. You might also want to buy from Intuit the merchant services account that they have so that you can accept credit cards through QuickBooks. You might want to order checks, and they also had some additional things you could purchase as well. And all of that is in the My Company information here. All you have to do when you're finished is go to the top of that window and click the X, and that will put you back on what we call the home screen. And that's really all there is to the option called My Company in QuickBooks. Let's go ahead now and jump over to Section 4 and talk about identifying the components of the QuickBooks environment. We're currently working in Module 2, and this is the module called Getting Started. We're in Section 4 now, and I want to take a few moments and talk to you a little bit about identifying the components of the QuickBooks environment. Basically, what I mean by that is I'd like to go over the screen itself with you, get you familiar with terminology, maybe how you can change some things so they work better for you. And that's all we want to do here is just kind of get you familiar with things. Let me go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks, and I will get started talking to you about the home screen. Let's go ahead and start at the top and work our way down. The first thing I want you to notice is that your company name is right here in your title bar at the top. It also tells you the version of QuickBooks you're using and which screen you happen to be on. In this case, your home screen. This is what we call your home screen right here. The next thing you'll notice is a menu bar, and you're probably familiar with using these in other programs. There's a few things here that I want you to get familiar with. First of all, under the Edit option, there's a find here that we're going to use when we're searching for anything, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Also, there's some preferences we're going to be looking at over in Module 3. A lot of these options that you see up here, you can also see on your home screen. For example, when it says Vendors right here, it also says Vendors right here. That's a quick way to get to what we call the Vendor Center. Or also if it says Customers here, here's the Customer Center. That's another way to get to customers. So you'll have multiple ways to get to the same place. On the left-hand side of your screen here, you have what we call your icon bar. And as you click on the different options here, you will open the different windows. Some people prefer this to be across the top of their screen, and you have an option to change that if you like. The way you change that is you go to View on your menu and choose Top Icon Bar. And now you'll see it's up here at the top. It's really just a matter of personal preference. I prefer this myself because I feel like I have more room to work on the screen from left to right when that is on. Now, something else that I'm not sure how people work without this, but there's something called the Open Windows list that you can turn on. If I go up to View and choose the first option, Open Windows List, then this will appear on the left. Now, what this does is every single time I click on an icon on my home screen, let's say I click on Create Invoices, I've now opened a window that will allow me to actually put an invoice in. If I don't want to close it for whatever reason, I can just come over here and go back to home and open something else or do whatever I need to do. And when I'm ready, I can go back to Create Invoices. When I'm ready to close this window, all I have to do is use the X that's in the top right corner of that window to close it. And now you can see that I only have Home over here under the Open Windows. You also have here your home page, which you're on now, and also your Insights. Let me just mention the Insights real quick. The Insights tab is going to allow you to see what some people call a dashboard. It's a quick overview of what's going on with your company file. Now, obviously, we have no data in here yet, but if we did, we could see a quick profit and loss right here. We could see information about our income down here. We can see information about our expenses over here, and there's a little donut graph it looks like over here. Once we get some information in later on, we'll go back and look at this. I'm going to flip back to the home page. Now let's talk a little bit about how the home page is actually set up. There are actually 5 sections. The first section that you see here, where it says Vendors, this is Accounts Payable. If you're not familiar with that term, anything having to do with the bills that you pay that come in the mail, this is where you're going to work with that. You can see here you can enter your bills and you can pay bills. If you work with the purchase order system, this is where you could enter purchase orders, receive your inventory, and then a bill would come in the mail for that. This is your accounts receivable section down here, and this is probably where you'll spend the majority of your time. Accounts receivable has to do with customers. Customers are people or businesses that buy from you, whereas when we talk about vendors up here, these are people or businesses you buy from. That's a good way to remember that. This has your entire flow chart as far as customers are concerned. You'll notice sometimes you estimate jobs, sometimes you invoice customers. That's how you're going to get paid. Then they pay you, and obviously at some point the money goes in the bank. The next section down here has to do with your payroll. You'll notice that if you had gone through the Easy Step interview and said, yes, I want to use the payroll service, this would have populated some icons for payroll. Since I did not tell it that, the only one I have is the Enter Time option. The next section over here where it says Company, these are things that have to do with the file itself, not necessarily specific customers or specific vendors. This chart of accounts is the most important thing in QuickBooks right here. Get really familiar with that. We'll be talking about it in a later module. But all of the money that flows in or out of QuickBooks will go into one of these accounts in the chart of accounts. The items and services, these are things that you would sell your customer, or sometimes you purchase them as well. We'll have a list of those. And there's some other things here that you may or may not use, like the time tracking, for example, or the inventory activities, or ordering checks and tax forms. Really, those are ancillary things that you may or may not use. And then we'll talk about the calendar in a later module as well. The last little section here is your banking section. All of these items that you see here have to do with something that happens at the bank. You make deposits, you write checks, you have a checkbook register, you reconcile your checking account or your credit cards. So again, you have 5 sections. You have your vendor section, which is accounts payable, customers, which is accounts receivable, your payroll, company, and then banking. Now on the right, there's a couple of things. First of all, this section that says account balances. Once we get some accounts set up for you, like your checking account, savings, etc., you would see them in the list with the balance. And one of the ways you can go to that particular account is to double click on it right from this list. These are all things that Intuit can sell you. You can turn on payroll, accept credit cards, order checks from them, or activate T-sheets, which is timesheets. If you don't want to see this, just hit this little arrow on the right and that will hide it for you. And there's one more thing I'll mention, and that is your backup status. We haven't really talked about backing up yet, but if you have the desktop version of QuickBooks, you will want to back it up. And that way, if you ever need to use that backup for some reason, you would have it. And there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can actually do it manually, where you actually put in a flash drive, a CD, some other form of media where you can save it to. The other option is for a fee. This is not free. Intuit will back it up for you. And so you'll just see right here, it says your data has not been backed up. It may have just been backed up, so don't always rely on that to tell you. Again, if you don't want to see this, just use this little arrow to kind of hide that and get it out of your way. And that gives you a quick overview of how the home screen is set up. One more quick thing. If you happen to navigate somewhere in QuickBooks, let's just say I clicked Receive Payments here, and I don't know how to get back to home, maybe you didn't have your open windows list here, you'll notice the very first icon says Home, and that's always going to take me back to my home screen. That's a real quick way of actually looking at the home screen. What I want to do now is take you over into Section 5, and we're going to talk a little bit in Section 5 about how to upload your data from the desktop version to the QuickBooks Online if you decide to move to the online version. This is the last section of Module 2, Getting Started, and before we leave this module, I wanted to take a moment and talk to you a little bit about how to convert your QuickBooks desktop data to the online version. You may decide at some point you need to access your QuickBooks file remotely, and that might be a reason for going with the online version. It's a pretty simple process to do, so let me show you how this works. Make sure you have your QuickBooks desktop file open. It doesn't matter which window you happen to be looking at. All you have to do is go up to File on your menu, come down to Utilities, Copy Company File for QuickBooks Online. It's going to tell you that before it can export your data, it has to close all of the windows. It will ask you if you want to continue. You just click OK there, and now you're going to save this. You decide where you'd like to save it. You just hit Save at the bottom, and then it's going to convert your data for you. Now what you have to do is go ahead and set up your subscription online, and once you get it set up, in there you can go in and you can actually import this particular file. So you can see that it's a super simple process to do. If you decide that you don't like the online version once you start working with it, you can't go the other way. You can't download it back to your desktop version. You would get in touch with Intuit at that point, and then they would go in and back up your file for you, and they would help you actually put it back into your desktop version. That's going to wrap up Module 2, which was Getting Started module. I want to take you now over to Module 3, where we're going to talk a lot about different ways to customize the QuickBooks environment. We're just getting started now with Module 3, which is the module where we're going to talk about customizing the QuickBooks environment. One of the first things you'll want to do is go through the preferences in QuickBooks and set some of the different preferences so that they work best for your company file. And I want to take a few moments and go through all of those options with you so you'll know which options are the ones that you'll want to change. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks, and I'll show you how to get to the preferences. What you want to do is go ahead and go up to Edit on your menu and come down to Preferences at the bottom of the list. The way the Preferences window works is you'll notice there are different groupings of options over on the left, and typically when you come in, it's already on the General grouping. For each of these groupings, you'll want to check the options that are under the My Preferences tab and also the Company Preferences tab. Let's start at the very top where it says Accounting, and I'll click on the My Preferences tab, and you'll see there are no options here. So now I'll click on the Company Preferences tab so that we can look at a couple of these. I want to talk to you about this very first one that says Use Account Numbers. Now let me just cancel this for a moment. I want to show you currently what your chart of accounts looks like. This is the most important thing in QuickBooks right here. It's called the Chart of Accounts. We're going to talk more about this over in Section 3. Right now you'll notice that it's just a list of your accounts, and if you notice they're in alphabetical order over here by whatever type they happen to be. For example, if you look at the expense accounts, you'll notice now these are in alphabetical order. If I go back to the preferences where we just were, remember Edit on the menu, Preferences, I'm under the Accounting grouping on the left, and I want to choose the Company Preferences tab. If I check Use Account Numbers and just click OK here, notice now your chart of accounts has what we call general ledger numbers here on the left. So now they're sorted by type, but instead of alphabetical, they're actually numerical right over here. That's the difference. And these are just options. You can turn these on or off. I'm going to go back to the preferences. Same place we just were. That's going to be up to you if you want to use those account numbers. The next option I want to point out is the option to use the class tracking for transactions. Let me just give you a quick overview of how this would work. Right now, you can actually run reports on the company as a whole. If you want to run a profit and loss, for example, to see how much money you made or lost, you can do that. If you want to break your company down into smaller sections to run a profit and loss, let's say, you can do that as well. As an example, let's say that you have a business that has 5 different locations. You can actually turn on this class list, and every transaction you create will have a drop down where you can pick one of the different locations that that transaction is for. If you do that consistently, you can run a report on the entire company, but you can also run that same report per location. We call that the class tracking. So it's very good for options like locations, or any way you want to break down your company, maybe by departments. You'll be able to use it for that as well. The last thing I want to point out on this screen is this option that says Set Date and Password down here at the bottom. One of the things that you will find is that accountants and bookkeepers will actually close the books at the end of every month, and then they'll close the books at the end of the year. Here's what this means. Let's say you've closed the books through the end of October. It is now November. You can't make a change before October 31st, so you won't be able to make a change in the close period. If you see something you need to change, the correct way to change it is to make an offsetting entry in the current period. Let me give you an example. What if you actually see that there is a bill that you've entered twice and you'd like to delete one? Since it's in a closed period, you won't be able to do that, but you can make a credit memo in the current period to offset that second one that you originally wanted to delete. That's how it works when we talk about closing the books. If you did decide to close the books, you would click here to set a date through which you wanted to close your books, and also you would set a password. QuickBooks will not make you close your books. It's not even going to ask you. You just need to know this feature is here and go here and close them whenever you're ready to do that. Let me go down a few on the left here to the grouping that says General. And notice when you make some of these changes, it will ask you if you'd like to save it. I'm going to say yes. And this time I'm going to start with the My Preferences tab. There are a few options here that you'll definitely want to turn on, starting with the very first one, pressing Enter to move between the fields. Currently, if you don't have this checked, what will happen is you will start typing in a form. Let's say you're typing in an invoice, for example, and you hit the Enter key, thinking you're going to move on to the next field. What it will actually do is save and close that invoice, and then you won't realize it and you'll enter a second one. If you check this box, what will happen is you can use the Enter key or the Tab key at any time to move back and forth between your fields. There are a lot of other little options here. For example, would you like it to beep when it records a transaction? Would you like to turn off pop-up messages for products and services? I do want you to notice this one here, automatically recall last transaction for this name. What this means is, let's say that you write a check to pay your electric bill. You're going to fill out the pay to the order of, you're going to put in the amount, you might put some things in the memo, you'll have your account number somewhere, you're going to pick the correct account that this would go to in the chart of accounts. There's quite a few things that are going to be on that check. Wouldn't it be nice the next time you pay to the order of and use the same vendor name that it pre-populates the latest check for you and you just go ahead and change the amount of money? That would keep your accounting consistent and a lot less typing for you. The other thing is, you might want to check this option, use today's date as default. And basically what that means is that any transactions that you create will have today's date on them, and you can change them if you need to. All right, going down the list, let's look at items and inventory, and I will go ahead and save my changes. In this case, I'm going to need to click on Company Preferences. If you actually went through the Easy Step interview and you said, I do not track inventory, then this will not be checked. Let's say that you want to now track inventory, then you can come in and make sure this is checked. The other thing is, if you see that you do not have the purchase order option on your home screen, it's again because this is not checked. Going down to the next one on the left, Jobs and Estimates. If you are doing job costing in QuickBooks, which basically means that every transaction you create, you're going to choose which job it applies to, then you might want to look at some of these options. Here you have different words that mean pending, awarded, in progress, and you may have different terminology for these. So notice that you can go down the list and you can actually change these to whatever your terminology happens to be. Here's where it asks, do you create estimates? If you said in the Easy Step interview that you do, but maybe you forgot to do the progress invoicing, notice here you can turn them both on or both off. Back on the left here, going down to payments, there are a couple things here I'd like to point out. I want to just make you aware of this one for a little bit later. This one says use undeposited funds as default deposit to account. What that means is once we start entering invoices and then we receive payments, it will actually put that payment in our chart of accounts in an account called undeposited funds. You may not want that. Later on, when we talk in another module about working with payments, I will show you how this works if you come in and uncheck this. You can also set up online payments. You have the ability in QuickBooks to actually email an invoice over to your customers. If you want the customer to be able to click on that invoice and pay you right there with a credit card or using the bank transfer option, then you can check this right here. You would have to go and set these up previously with Intuit. There's also some options for payment reminders at the bottom. And when we talk about payment reminders, we're talking about for customers. Do you want to send payment reminders to your customers, yes or no? And if QuickBooks Desktop is open, it will prompt you at, in this case, 10 a.m., but you can set that at whatever time you'd like to go ahead and do that. You'll also notice that if QuickBooks is not open, you'll still see the prompt whenever you open it the next time. I want to go ahead and stop the video right here and have you go on over into the Preferences Part 2. I will see you shortly. Welcome back. We are working in Module 3 and we are on Section 1 where we're talking about the preferences. We've already completed Part 1. This is going to be Part 2. We're just going to continue where we left off talking about the different options in QuickBooks. When we left off, we were talking about the options under the payments on the left, and we talked about the fact that if you're receiving payments from a customer, then it's going to automatically use the undeposited funds as the default deposit to account. We will actually change that when we get to the section where we talk about receiving payments. Let's go ahead and move over to payroll and employees on the left. When you went through the Easy Step interview, one of the questions was, do you want to use the payroll feature, yes or no? And if you had said no, you wouldn't have even one single icon on your home screen in QuickBooks to set it up if you changed your mind. You would need to come in here and choose full payroll in order to see that icon. While you're in here, there will be some preferences for payroll that you could use. You could go ahead and look at some options for pay stubs, workers' comp, and sick and vacation. There's some checkboxes right here about recalling some different options that are on previous paychecks. And then down at the bottom, if you want to sort your list of employees by first name or last name, you could change that option. One thing to keep in mind is payroll is not free in QuickBooks. You do have to pay for it. We'll be talking about that later when we get to the module about payroll. Let's go ahead and talk about reminders over on the left. These are things that you can have QuickBooks remind you that you have to take care of. It might be you have checks to print. It might be you have some overdue invoices. There might be some to-dos you had created. You can have QuickBooks show you those in a summary or a list. A summary basically means if you had 6 checks to print, then it would actually just give you a total of those 6 checks. If you chose the list option, then it would show you each of the checks individually. Also, for some of these, you can have it remind you earlier than the actual due date if you want, and you can see you can put in the number of days right here for that. You're going to find that the reminders don't just automatically pop up on your screen to remind you that you have to take care of these things. The only time you see the reminders is when you first open the company file. There will be a white window there that lists all of these things. You won't see it again once you close that window. The other thing is, under the tab that says My Preferences here, you have to have this checked, because if you don't, you will not see the reminders window at all. Let's move down to reports and graphs. There are some reports in here that you can actually run through QuickBooks, and if there are some reports that you need to modify the options of before opening, then you can check the box here and it'll prompt you for things like that. There's also some options under the company preferences that you'll want to know about. One of them is when you run reports in QuickBooks, they're automatically on an accrual basis. You may want to run them on a cash basis. Now you can change that on each report, but you can also just change it right here so they're automatically on that cash basis. You'll see some other options as far as aging reports. You can age from the due date or the transaction date. You might want reports to show items by the name only versus the name and description. You can see some of those options right here. Moving down to sales and customers on the left, let's see if there's any options under the My Preferences tab. And one of the things you'll see is that there is an option in QuickBooks called time/cost. And what that allows you to do is if you incur any expenses that you need to turn around and invoice a customer for, then you can actually pull those onto an invoice. QuickBooks will remember those and pull them for you. You can have it prompt you automatically to add those when you pull in a specific customer or job, or you can have it just ask you what you'd like to do. Back under the company preferences, there's going to be a couple of things here you might want to know about. First of all, if you have a particular shipping method that you use, then you can actually have that pull in automatically if you like to use Federal Express, for example. If you're not shipping anything, none of this will apply to you. Down to sales tax on the left, and I'm going to save this change. One of the questions in the Easy Step interview was, do you charge sales tax, yes or no? Let's say that you had said no originally and now you've changed your mind, then you can come here and say yes. It's also going to ask you here to set up your most common sales tax item. Now, you'll actually have to get out of the Preferences window to do this, and that will be done back under here under Items and Services. You'll set up that common sales tax, and then you can come in and choose it from this particular list. We'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about sales tax. You can also go ahead and tell QuickBooks that most of your items are taxable, or maybe they're not, and you can choose your terminology for those. And there's a couple of other options about paying sales tax. If you pay it monthly, quarterly, or annually, then you can set that up here as well. Going down the list, I'm going to skip down to send forms. I mentioned to you that you have the ability in QuickBooks to actually send invoices, purchase orders, things like that through email right from within QuickBooks. If you do, there's going to be a generic, what I call a cover sheet that goes with it, and it's this one here for invoices called Basic Invoice. I'll just go ahead and hit Edit down here so you can see what it looks like. You can see that it says Dear, and it has the first name, your invoice number, your transaction is attached. You can see this. You can change this to say whatever you would like. You can also create your own if you don't want to use the basic one. I'll just go ahead and cancel that for now. And here's where you would add a new one if you wanted to create your own. And this is for invoices. You do have email templates for statements, purchase orders, etc. Almost done here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit on the left. I want to mention the spelling because you do have spell check available. If you're under the My Preferences tab, you can check or uncheck this always check spelling before printing. That is a really great feature. You do want to have your spelling checked when you're sending out invoices or correspondence, but it can be a pain sometime if you don't like that. The last one at the bottom is your time and expenses. You'll want to go to the company preferences, and this is where we talked a little bit in the Easy Step interview about the time tracking. You could turn that option on or off. You could also specify the first day of your work week. And then down at the bottom, you have some invoicing options. For example, if you wanted to track all your reimbursed expenses as income, things like that, you can go ahead and set those options. There are a ton of other preferences in this window. You'll want to take time and look at some of these, and some of these you won't even recognize until you've been using QuickBooks for a while. But I just wanted you to see some of the more important ones, and I want you to make sure you know how to get to this. And remember, you get to this window by going up here to Edit and coming down to Preferences at the bottom of the list. I'm going to go ahead and click OK now, and our options are set. You might see some new icons that have appeared on your home screen, like, for example, the payroll right here. And those are because you've turned those options on or off in the preferences. Well, that's going to go ahead and wrap up the section on preferences. Let's go ahead and go over to section 2, and I'll talk to you a little bit about working with the users in QuickBooks. We are working in Module 3 where we're talking about different ways to customize the QuickBooks environment. We've gone through the preferences. That was actually section 1, and now we're on section 2, working with users. Right now, if you open the company file, you would just see QuickBooks. You'd be able to start working right away. If you set up users, as soon as you open the company file, you will have to type in your username and your password in order to access the company file information. It is to your advantage to set up users for each person that will be using your company file. You do have the ability to actually track any changes that each user makes. That is one reason to set these up, because you can look at a report called the audit trail and just see what the transaction used to be, what it is now. It's a really good way of tracking down errors. Another really good reason for setting up the users would be if you have employees helping you, because then you can limit their access to certain areas in QuickBooks. Only the administrator can add, edit, or delete a user. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks, and I will show you how to go ahead and start working with users. As I mentioned, only the administrator can add, edit, or delete a user. You would have to be logged in as administrator to do this. You would need to go up to your menu and click on Company, and then you'll see an option that says Set up Users and Passwords, and then you'll see Set up Users. By default, you can have up to 5 users in QuickBooks. If you need additional users, you do have the ability to purchase them. You will see currently that the administrator is logged on, and you'll see over on the right is the Add, Edit, or Delete User option. Let's go ahead and add a user, and we will say that we have hired a person to come in and help us pay the bills. I'll show you as we go through here how you're able to limit their access to certain areas of QuickBooks. Let's say we go ahead and put in our new user's name, and we'll say it's Carol, and we're going to give Carol a password. Now, a couple things about passwords. You want to make sure that no one else has the same password, and make sure that you, as the administrator, know what the password actually is in case Carol happens to leave the company and you want to go ahead and log in as Carol or that sort of thing. I'm going to go ahead and click Next. And now it asks me, what do you want this user to have access to? All areas of QuickBooks, selected areas, or notice there's an option also for an external accountant. What this option means is if you have an accountant you'd like to use your QuickBooks, you can give them their own username and password, and that way they don't have access to certain things in here, such as sensitive customer data, if you have credit card numbers, things like that in here. I'm going to choose Selected Areas of QuickBooks and click Next. Now what's going to happen is it's going to walk through a series of screens, and for each of these it's going to ask me, does this user have access to everything in QuickBooks, which would be full access, no access, or selective. The first area it asks about is sales and accounts receivable, and we're going to say no access to that. That would be anything having to do with invoicing customers. The next area it asks about is purchases and accounts payable. Now this is what we hired this person to do. We hired this person to come in and help pay the bills, so we'll give them full access. Now I'm not going to give access to any more areas, but just notice it asks about checking and credit cards, it asks about inventory, time tracking, payroll, sensitive accounting activities. These are things like in QuickBooks, should this person be able to transfer funds between, let's say, checking and savings? Should they be able to do journal entries? Those are things that we consider sensitive accounting activities, and we're going to say no. The next screen asks about the financial reports that go with those sensitive activities that we just mentioned, so we'll leave that on no access as well. And then it asks about changing or deleting transactions. I would leave this where it defaults. The first one asks, in the area that the person has access to, should they be able to delete or change a transaction? Absolutely. What if our employee actually entered a bill twice and they'd like to delete one of them? This question asks about, should the employee or user also have the ability to change or delete transactions before the closing date? If you remember us talking about using QuickBooks to close the books at the end of the month, what this is saying is, would you want this user to have the ability to go in prior to those closed periods and make those changes? And we are going to say no. This is a synopsis of the areas it asks about and how we answered each of those questions. I'm going to hit finish, and now you'll see that Carol is one of my users. Let me show you how this is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and close this window, and I'm going to log out of this company file. Every time you're finished for the day, you should always log out. Go up to File on your menu, and now you'll see this option says Close Company / Log Off. This is the screen you should see every day when you come in. You're going to double click on your company file, and this time what you're going to notice is it's going to ask you to put in the username and password. Now it has the username of the person that was last logged in. You're just going to type over that, and then you're going to put in the actual password and then click OK. One of the first things that you might notice is that you have your icon bar on the left, and that's because all of the options are set per user. You might also be saying to yourself, well, I thought we limited Carol's access just to the accounts payable section. Here's what happens if Carol clicks on an icon that she does not have access to. Let's say create invoices, for example. It will pop up with a warning saying that you need sales and accounts receivable permission to perform this action. She will have to ask her administrator to give her permission to get into those areas. That's how this is going to work. Let me go ahead and log back off, and we'll log back in as admin again. We're going to close company and log off. And by the way, it will ask you every 4th time that you get out of QuickBooks if you would like to back up your company file. Even if you just backed it up, it will ask you that. Right now I'm going to say no. We'll talk about backing up in a later module. Let me go ahead and double click on our company again. And this time we're going to log back in as admin. Notice it still says Carol, so I'm going to type in admin. And we did not set up a password when we went through the Easy Step interview, but in real life, make sure you set up that password. As the administrator, since you're responsible for the users, you want to make sure that you go ahead and delete any users that have left your company. Maybe you have a new employee and they've replaced Carol. Do not give them the same username and password. Make sure you delete that user, and then you go ahead and set up the new user like we talked about. If you needed to change the username or a password, you could always edit the user. And notice a couple of other things. You can set the closing date from here if you were going to use that option to close the books. And that's pretty much what you need to know about how the users work right here. When we get into the reports in a later module, I'll show you that audit trail. I'm going to go ahead and hit close, and that's all we need to talk about as far as users are concerned. Let's go ahead now and move over into lesson 3, and we're going to spend a good bit of time talking about the chart of accounts. The chart of accounts is the most important part of QuickBooks. Basically, it's a listing of everywhere that the money could flow in your QuickBooks file. For example, anytime you spend money, what did you spend that money for? Was it for meals? Was it for gas for the car? If you received money, was it income for the business? Those are what we call different items on the chart of accounts, and we're going to spend a good bit of time on this because, like I said, this is the most important part. If your items are not set up correctly on this list, your reports will not be accurate and you won't know why. There are 2 parts to this. Make sure you watch both part 1 and 2 before you move on to the next section. Like I mentioned, the chart of accounts is the most important part of QuickBooks. Therefore, you will want to know how to get to it whenever you need to. It's right here on your home screen and it says Chart of Accounts. Every single thing in QuickBooks will flow back through one of these choices. When you look at this list, you'll notice there are different types of items on this list, and currently they're set up alphabetical per type. For example, when you look at the expense accounts, you'll see over here they're alphabetical. We did talk about in section 1 working with the preferences, and I told you there was a preference where if you wanted to turn on the general ledger numbers, you could do that. There's going to be quite a few items you want to add to this list, and what I want to do with you is go through all the different types over here, and then we'll talk about the ones you need to add. You'll get most of them added pretty much the first time you sit down, but you will find others that you'll need to add as you go along. Let's go ahead and start with the first type, which are bank accounts. And you'll notice there are no bank accounts over here. We're going to have to actually set these up. Now, the easiest way to add an account is to right-click and choose the new option from this list. I want to also just point out that on the very bottom left of your screen, you'll see an option that says Account. And by clicking the arrow next to Account, there's the same options right there you would get by right-clicking. New will obviously set up a new account for you. Here's where you would edit an existing one or delete one. One of the things you need to know about any list in QuickBooks, if you've ever used an item from that list even one time, you're not able to delete it. That's because those numbers would actually pull into reports. Think about if you had a bank account that you used for a while and then you close that bank account. You might not need the name to show up on the list anymore. You can hide it by making it inactive, but you can't delete it because those numbers actually are required for reporting purposes. Let's go ahead and create a checking account. I'm going to go ahead and click New. And the first thing it asks is, what type of account is this? Now, we're going to be going through all of these. Right now, we're talking about bank accounts. You'll notice when you choose an option on the left, it gives you some examples of what a bank account would be over here on the right. A bank account would obviously be checking, savings, money market, petty cash like you see here, but let me add some to the list. If you're using PayPal, Square, Venmo, any of those other types of payment options, you would want to add each of those as a bank account. That's all they are, is they're bank accounts. Even Bitcoin. The other thing that you'll want to add is if you have any cash expenditures that flow through your business, you'll want to have an account to put those in, and the only way you can do that is to create a bank account for those. Just a little FYI, if you do that, then your bank account will always show a negative for that particular account, and that's okay. It's showing the expenses that ran through the company that were actually paid for with cash. Right now, we're going to set up our checking account. If you picked the wrong type on the previous screen, they give you a second chance to go in and change that type. When you name your account, you can name it anything you want. If you want to call it checking, you can do that. If you want to call it payroll, another one called operating, you might call one First Federal, another one Heritage Trust. It really doesn't matter what you call them as long as you know what they represent. And you will want a separate bank account for every real life bank account that you have. This is not a sub-account of another. We'll talk about sub-accounts a little bit later. Here's some things that are optional, a description. If you wanted to put in here that this was the operating account, you could certainly do that so that if someone was on this screen, they would know what checking represented. You do not need your bank account number or your routing number. These are more informational for you. I would not put any of this in here. You really don't need it. You would, however, need an opening balance. I'm going to click on Enter Opening Balance, and then it's going to ask me to put in the statement ending balance and the statement ending date. You have to decide when you want to start your company file. If you've decided you want to start at the beginning of your fiscal year, and let's just say that's January, you'll want to get out January's bank statement and put in whatever its opening balance is. Remember that December's ending and January's beginning are the same number. If you decided you're going to start with the current month, just remember that your reports are only as accurate as all the data you put in, but you could start with your current month. Just make sure you know the opening balance for that particular month. Now, if you're setting this up and you really don't know the balance right now, you can always plug in 0 and go back and change it later. I'm going to go ahead and plug in $5,000. And when you type money in QuickBooks, don't type the $sign, don't type the commas. It will stick all that in for you. And I'm going to go ahead and put in a statement ending. And I'm going to say that I'm starting at the beginning of the year, so I'll just go back and pick January 1. Or remember I told you that December 31 is the exact same number. And I'm going to click OK. And now you'll see it shows me my opening balance as of, in this case, 12/31 of 2018. Down here, if you still write a lot of checks, then you might want QuickBooks to pop up and remind you when you get to a certain check number to order some more checks. You can plug that in. And just a little FYI, if you're still writing checks, you do not need to buy checks from Intuit. You can buy them anywhere you want. They do try to sell them to you, and that's what this option is here for. You're going to notice in QuickBooks a lot of screens will say Save and Close and Save and New. Save and Close means close what I've got here and save it, and I'll be on the screen that was underneath this. The Save and New option means save this and keep me on the same screen because I have another bank account I'd like to enter. I'm going to go ahead and hit Save and Close just to show you what we've done. And because I dated this more than 90 days in the past, it's basically warning me about that. And if this is a pain, then you can go ahead into the preferences like you see here and turn that option off. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, that I'd like to go ahead and save it. And it will ask you from time to time if you'd like to set up your bank feeds. We're going to say no. Basically what that's asking is, do you want to download from the bank automatically? We're going to talk about that in a later module. For now, I'm just going to say no. I want you to notice now there is a new bank account at the very top of the list. Bank accounts typically show up at the very top. And you can see that it has a balance of $5,000. And something just to notice, you don't really have to know this, but in accounting there's always a debit for something and a credit on the other side of the transaction. And this is what you're seeing here, that there is one side is the checking account and the other side of that entry is called opening balance equity. Let's go ahead and set up another. I'm going to set up a savings account and I'm going to say that we have $20,000. I'll just right click and choose the new option. I'm going to say this is a bank account. I'm going to click continue. I'm going to name this savings. Remember, you can name it anything you want. And all I'm going to do is put in the opening balance of $20,000. I'm going to date it for 12/31 of 2018 and click OK. And I'm just going to save and close. I'm going to go ahead and tell it yes, it's okay, because I know that's over 90 days old and I don't want to download from the bank right now. And here you'll see my checking account for $5,000 and my savings has a balance of $20,000 and opening balance equity has $25,000. Let's go ahead and talk about some of these other accounts that you'll want to set up, and I want to just mention the assets just for a moment. An asset is something that makes your business more valuable. If you have chairs, desks, maybe the business owns some vehicles, equipment, those are all assets to the business, and you will want to set up these asset accounts to track those. A couple of terms that you'll want to get used to. When we talk about assets, you have some assets that are fixed. We call those fixed assets. And you'll also have some that are more liquid. Think about if you're a business where you have inventory in the back room. You are worth more because of that inventory, but your goal is to sell it and get it out the door. QuickBooks calls those other current assets. When you set these up, you want to have big buckets. And what I mean by that is you don't want to have one for every single asset that you own because the list would be way too long. You want to have one called vehicles, for example, another one called equipment. Anytime you have a lot of assets you could group together, create an account or a big bucket as I call it, and then you can put those assets in there. This is the one place where your accountant will be most helpful to you because you're not going to know what numbers to plug in here. You're going to get with the accountant. He or she will help you figure out the value of your vehicles, the value of your assets at a particular time. Also, if there's any depreciation or appreciation, the accountant will help you figure that out as well. And just a little FYI, QuickBooks does not do depreciation, and that's because there's so many different ways to do it. That's where your accountant, again, will come in helpful and help you plug in those numbers. You do want to set the accounts up because if you go to get a loan for the bank, for example, they're going to want to know, does the company have any assets? And you want to be able to show those to the bank. And there's other reasons as well for setting up your assets, but just know that this is the one place where the accountant would be most helpful. I want to go ahead and stop the video right here and go ahead and have you go over to part 2 so that we can continue talking about setting up your chart of accounts. We have a lot more to talk about as far as the chart of accounts is concerned. This is part 2. Make sure you've watched part 1 before you watch part 2, but let's go ahead and continue going through our chart of accounts. The next type that I want to talk to you about are your liabilities. A liability is something you owe. Some things you owe are considered short-term. For example, if you collect payroll taxes or you collect sales tax, those are short-term because you have to turn around and send those to the state or whatever entity the money belongs to. We call those short-term liabilities. Something you're going to pay off in 12, 13 months. A long-term liability would be more like a car loan, for example, because you might have a 5-year car note. When you set up your liabilities, you're going to tell QuickBooks if it's short-term or long-term, and the terminology they use for short-term is other current, like you see here. Notice they set up the payroll and the sales tax liabilities automatically, and that's because in the Easy Step interview, you told it that you turned on the payroll and that you actually do sales tax. Any others you would have to add. Let's go ahead and set up a car payment real quick so I can show you how to set up a liability that's more long-term. I'm just going to right-click and choose the New option. One of the things that might be a little confusing is this. When you set up a short-term liability, you're going to choose the Loan option right here. However, if it's a long-term liability, meaning it's over 12 months, 13 months, go ahead and use the option from this drop-down and it will say long-term liability. I'm going to go ahead and hit continue. I can name the account anything I want. Sometimes people will put the actual bank and they'll put the last couple digits of the account number. Sometimes they'll put the name of the vehicle. I'm going to say car payment. And then you'll notice down here there's a place for your opening balance. What you'll want to put here is as of the start date of your company file, not today, what was the balance you owed on the loan? Not when you took out the loan, but as of the actual start date. Let's say I owed $12,000, and let's say again that that was on 12/31 of 2018. And I'll just click OK, and I'll go ahead and save and close so you can see what it looks like. You'll now see that you have a car payment. It is a long-term liability, and I owe $12,000. Now, something to notice, the opening balance equity went down because anytime you owe something, that's a minus, whereas the bank account was a plus. So if you ever see a negative number, then don't worry about it. That's an accurate picture of your books. Did you notice that it didn't ask me anywhere what is the interest rate, the term in months, any of that? And that's because when you put in the loan, you're just setting up the account itself. You're not setting up any of the terms of the loan. We're actually going to be talking more about that in Module 8. Specifically in Section 3, we'll be talking about setting up what we call the loan through the Loan Manager in QuickBooks. The other thing I want to mention at this point is when you make a car payment, always put the principal amount to this loan because you want to see this go down. This is an accurate picture of what the loan balance should be. Do not set up your car payment as an expense to the business. It is not an expense, it is a liability. Any other loans you have, you would set up the same way. It could be that you took out a loan to start the business from the bank. It could be that you borrowed money from your personal to start the business. If you expect to pay yourself back, then go ahead and set up a loan for that. The next thing I want to talk about that you do not see here are credit card accounts. If you have credit cards that your business uses to buy items for the business, you want to set up these credit card accounts. All I'm going to do is right-click and choose New. You'll notice one of your choices is Credit Card, and then I'm going to click OK. Again, you can name your credit card anything you want. If you want to call it Capital One, if you want to call it Visa, Amex, it really doesn't matter. You just put in your credit card account, and you do want to have an opening balance again. Remember, the opening balance is going to be from the start date of your company file. Get out that statement, and whatever the opening balance is, go ahead and plug that in. Again, remember the previous month's ending and that month's beginning are the same exact number. I'm going to go ahead and say it was $3,500, and I'm going to put in my date of 12/31 of 2018 here and click OK. I'm going to go ahead and save and close. And you'll see now that when you see the credit card, the balance that you see over on the right is going to be the actual balance on the credit card. When you make a payment towards this Amex card, you want to make sure you put it to this account. Do not start breaking it out by how much is gas and how much is going to be food, that sort of thing, because we're going to do that in a different place in QuickBooks. This is just where the payments go right here. The next thing I want to talk about are your equity accounts, and you'll see there are a couple of them right here. If you think about equity, the word equity means equal. If you take money from the business and move it to personal, or you take personal money and move it to the business, those are both equal. You didn't make money or lose money. That's called owner equity. Let me give you an example of how I often see owner equity set up. Sometimes you'll see the terminology shareholder equity. That's money you put into the business. Or sometimes you'll see shareholder distributions. That's money you took out of the business. Another way that I'll see it set up is owner, and then I'll have sub-accounts underneath for contributions and distributions. Again, that's just a way of an owner showing that they took money out of the business or putting money into the business. And you can set it up however you'd like to. I'm going to right click and choose New, and I'll just set it up this way because I see this often. What I'm going to see here is the word owner as an equity account. And then I'll go ahead and say Save and New, and I'm going to say Contributions. This is when you put money into the business, and this will be a sub-account of owner. And I'll do one more. I'll say distributions. This is when you take money out of the business. This again will be a sub-account of owner. And now I'll go ahead and save and close so you can see what this looks like. And this is what sub-accounts look like underneath. But you can see that they're all considered equity. So if you put money into the business, it's considered an owner contribution. If you take money out, it's an owner distribution. Sometimes that is called a draw, an owner draw. The next type I want to mention to you are income accounts. You'll see there are a couple of them here. Income is when you actually make a sale for your business and money comes in. That's considered income. You can have one and just use it for everything, or you can break it out into multiple income accounts if you would like. The next section is the cost of goods sold. Anytime that you have to buy a product or a service to make a product or service selling your business, that's called a cost of goods sold. Often you'll see subcontractor expenses under here, job materials, things like that. And you'll notice that on a profit and loss, they will be actually subtracted from your income at the top. The largest grouping that we're going to talk about here are your expense accounts. And this is when you spend money. What did you spend the money for? You can see there's advertising, there's automobile, we've got bank service charges. You can kind of see the list going down here. Let's talk for a moment about sub-accounts, using them with expense accounts. Automobile is a good example because if I want to know how much I spent this year on gas, I really can't tell if I lump it all under automobile expenses, so you might want to consider making a sub-account underneath. I would just right-click and choose New. The sub-account has to be the same type as the main account, so it's an expense, and then I'll just hit Continue. And I'm going to call this one Fuel, and it will be a sub-account of Automobile. And this is how it will look. See how it's underneath it and it's indented a little bit? Some others you might want to consider having sub-accounts underneath. Insurance. You might have different types of insurance like liability, workman's comp, things like that. You can add multiple ones underneath there. You'll notice that you have professional fees. Typically as sub-accounts under there, I will see one for the attorney and one for the accountant. You'll notice there are utilities down here. You'll want to add sub-accounts below that. You'll want to add your water, electric, telephone, things like that. And notice also there's one called Ask My Accountant at the very bottom. If you just don't know where to stick something, stick it in this account called Ask My Accountant, and later you can go back and move it. This gives you a quick overview of how the chart of accounts is set up. Like I said, a lot of this you will get set up when you first sit down and start working on it, but you might find some 6 months later that you need to add. You can always go back and do that or make some of these sub-accounts of others, that sort of thing. We're going to be referring back to the chart of accounts often as we go through the rest of the videos, but for now, let's go ahead and wrap up part 2 of the chart of accounts. Why don't we go ahead and head over now to section 4, and I'll talk to you just for a few minutes about some of the QuickBooks sample files that you might want to look at when you're setting up your chart of accounts to make sure that you do yours the correct way. There are several different sample files within QuickBooks that you may want to open just to look at and see how they did something. Or if you're looking to set something up yourself in your own file, maybe you want to look in there and see how they did it. I want to show you where those sample files are and what type of files and what you can see by looking at those files. The way you're going to get to the sample files in QuickBooks is right here. It says Open a Sample File, and there's an arrow to the right. You're going to have at least one product-based business and one service-based business. You might have several others depending on the version of QuickBooks that you have. I'm going to go ahead and start the service-based business and just open it up. This is a company called Larry's Landscaping Services, and I want to go ahead and show you what the chart of accounts looks like in this particular one. When you're working with one of the sample files, you'll notice that today's date is December the 15th of 2024. I'll just click OK there, and it's going to go ahead and pull up Larry's Landscaping. Now let me go ahead and open the chart of accounts here so that you can see what it actually looks like. And let me scroll to the very top here. You'll notice it's very similar to what we did. It just has a lot more items in the list. We've got several different bank accounts here. And by the way, the ones with the lightning bolt mean they are set up for automatic download from the bank. We've got our current assets, some fixed assets, credit cards, liabilities, and there's a couple here we didn't mention before. We didn't mention the accounts receivable. All that is when you create an invoice, that creates what's called accounts receivable. It's money that customers owe you. This account will automatically be created once you create your first invoice. The flip side of that is you'll see there's one here called accounts payable. These are all the bills you've entered that you haven't yet paid. Once you create your first bill, you'll see that will populate there, and then you'll have some accounts payable. Looking down this list here, you can see there's several different equity accounts like we had talked about. Here's their owner equity. They set theirs up very similar to the way I set ours up. You've got owner's equity, and there's owner contributions and owner draws. There's several income accounts below. They've got one cost of goods sold and then the rest of the expense accounts. And you'll notice with a lot of these expense accounts, they have sub-accounts below. Notice how they set up automobile. We had done fuel as a sub-account, but they've also got insurance, licenses and fees, and maintenance and repairs. They've got insurance down here. Some people put auto insurance under insurance. That's certainly okay. It's just where would you like to see it on a report. And you can see all of these other ones all the way down the list. Let's go ahead and close this one, and I want to take a peek at the other sample file. I'll just go up to File and say Close Company. And the other one is a construction company, so it's going to have more of the inventory in it, and it's going to have a lot of things that a product-based business would actually have. Today's date is December 15th, 2024, and this is Rock Castle Construction. I'm going to go ahead and pull up their chart of accounts, and you'll see it's very similar to Larry's Landscaping, but it's going to have quite a few additional accounts that we didn't see previously. We're going to actually be using this for the rest of our videos, and that way you'll get a really good feel for how this chart of accounts is set up. Let's go ahead and go over into the last section in this module, Section 5. I want to show you a new feature in the 2020 version called the Company File Search. Okay, let's go ahead and wrap up Module 3. We've been talking about customizing the QuickBooks environment, and the last thing I want to talk to you about is the Company File Search option, which is new in the QuickBooks 2020 version. It's not a big deal. It's just a way of searching for a file that you may not see initially on the screen when you go to open a file. If your company file is closed, you're going to notice that the last few company files you had opened would be in this list right here. You could double click and just open them. If you were looking for one that was not on this list, you could go over here to open and search your computer. But they've got a new feature now in the 2020 version where you can actually have QuickBooks pull all the QuickBooks files and then you can search through those. It makes life a lot easier when you have your company files all over the place in your computer. I'm going to click on Find a Company File. What it's doing now is scanning QuickBooks, and it's going to pull up all the company files that it can find. And what's going to happen is once they all pop up here, then we're going to be able to search for one through this list. While it's scanning, notice it's scanning my local drive on my computer, but I could have it look through any removable media such as a flash drive, or I can have it look through a network that I might have. Once it's finished scanning, you can type in the name of the company file that you happen to be looking for, and go ahead and hit search over on the right, and there's your company file right there. All you have to do is select it and hit open, and that's going to open your company file. That's really all there is to working with the new feature, the Company File Search. This is going to wrap up Module 3, where we've been talking about customizing the QuickBooks environment. We're going to head over now to Module 4 and start talking a little bit about working with customers and jobs. We are now down to Module 4. In this particular module, we're going to talk a lot about working with customers and jobs. This is what we call accounts receivable, anything having to do with customers who are people or businesses that buy from you. You have the ability to track those customers in QuickBooks, and also if you have multiple jobs that you do for a particular customer, you can track that as well. And I'm going to show you how to set all of that up here in this first section, Working with Customers and Jobs, Part 1. There is a Part 2. Make sure you watch both parts before you go on. Let's go ahead and flip over to QuickBooks, and I'll show you how to set up customers. The way I'm going to get to a list of my customers is I'm going to go to what's called the Customer Center. Now, there are a couple different ways I can access the Customer Center. This is the easiest way right here from the home screen. But I did want you to notice that you have an icon that says Customers on your icon bar. And also, if you go to the menu, you can click on the Customer Center that way. Any of these three options are going to take you to the same exact place. What you see here is a list of all of your active customers. You'll notice that currently they're alphabetical by last name. QuickBooks is not going to do that automatically for you, but it will sort by the first character that you type in. That means that if you type last name, comma, first name when you're setting them up, they'll all be alphabetical order by last name. Sometimes a customer is a business. That's okay. It's still going to be alphabetical, by the first letter in that name for that business. These that look like they're indented like this, those are jobs for that customer. If your business does not use the job feature, that's okay. You don't have to set them up. You'll notice that I can see the balance the customer owes me as a total and also the balance the customer owes per job. This column over here is where you can add an attachment. Let's say you had a Word doc or someone emailed you a particular file that you wanted to attach to this. You saw that I just double-clicked right here and that brought up this attachments window. I can now search my computer. If I'd already saved the file once, I could go grab it that way. I could scan it in right from here, or I could go to the Document Center and pull it in that way. I might also have a file that's in Outlook and I can just drag and drop it here. Maybe it's on my desktop, I drag and drop it, or if there's other folders, I can drag and drop them here as well. All of those are ways that I can actually attach that file. When I'm finished, I'll just hit done, and I would see a little paper clip right over here indicating there was an attachment. There's also a paper clip here, and that's the same exact thing. It's just another way to add an attachment to this customer. When I'm clicked on this customer, you'll notice that I can come right up to the top here. It says active customers, and I can pull the list down and look at the list a couple of different ways. I might just want to see the customers that have an open balance right now, maybe anyone with overdue invoices or almost overdue invoices. I can also look at the whole list by going to all customers at the top. Any list in QuickBooks, you have the ability to take items from that list and make them inactive temporarily. That way you won't see them when you're in other areas of QuickBooks and looking at the drop-down list. Let's just say that I wanted to go ahead and make Babcock's Music Shop inactive. If you notice there's an X here and I just click, and that makes it inactive. When I go back now and look at my active customers, you'll notice it's not on the list. If I wanted to make it active again, I just go back and I click the X, and it will ask me, do you want to activate the subs as well? I would say yes, and now it's active again. And I'll be able to do that with the chart of accounts or with items, any list in QuickBooks. You'll notice that whichever customer you're clicked on, you're going to see information on the right about that customer. I can see the customer's name, their account number, the terms, their billing address. Notice if I need to see more information up there, I can drag this window down a little bit. I can also see their phone number, and there's a link to their email. This would actually send them an email right from here. It's a live hyperlink. I also have the ability to edit this information and pin a note here if I'd like. I'll show you how to do that here in just a moment. Here's several reports for this customer. These are called quick reports. Even though the first one says quick report, they're all considered quick reports in QuickBooks. There's an open balance report. I can show estimates for this customer and a customer snapshot. Now way back over here, if I wanted to get a map to this particular address or directions, I can do this. This will actually use the Google Maps function. It'll just go online and pull it up automatically for you. The bottom part of the screen has 5 different tabs. The first tab shows all the transactions for that particular customer. You'll notice when you look down the list, there's payments, estimates, invoices, and they're actually sorted in order by date. You can see the little arrow points down next to date right there. That's how I know that. I can choose to sort by number just by clicking the heading there, or go back and sort date again if I want to sort it either ascending or descending. I can also filter this by looking at just invoices if I wanted, or just credit memos. I can use any of these options to create a filter. I can filter by date as well. You'll see over here where it says date, I might look at anything that happened this fiscal year, maybe last fiscal year, but I can also filter by date. The neat thing about working in this is that I can double click on any of these transactions to go to that particular transaction. If I want to see this invoice, I just double click on it and it's going to bring the invoice up. If I wanted to look at it and then close it, I could. I could make a change and close it, whatever I wanted to do with this. I'm going to go ahead and close it. I'll just hit save and close at the bottom of the screen. And now I'm back to my customer center. This is a quick way to access the customer transactions. There's other ways to do it in QuickBooks, but I find this to be the easiest way. At the bottom of this window, it says Manage Transactions, and there's a drop-down arrow. There are several different things you can do from here. You might go ahead and create any of these entries. You'll also notice that at the top of your screen where it says New Transactions, this is the same list. These options are all on the home screen. Chances are you're not going to be here when you want to create invoices, for example. So that option is there if you wanted to use it, but chances are you're not going to use it from this window. The next tab over are your contacts. These are contacts that have